time. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to this joint special meeting of the City of Pflugerville and PCDC. I'd like to call my part of the meeting to order. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as we call to order, I just want to advise everyone at City Council that Adam will be momentarily delayed, but will be arriving in short order. So he'll be joining us as soon as he gets here. We'll go right then to item 2, public comment. In accordance with the Texas Attorney General's opinion, any public comment that is made on an item that is not on the published final agenda may only be heard by the PCDC board. No formal action, discussion, deliberation, or comment will be made by the PCDC board, and each person providing public comment will be limited to 3 minutes.
It's just on there.
Here, do this one first. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, this is we're good. Okay. So is there any public comment to be had? Okay, seeing no public comment, I'm closing item 2. We'll now move to item 3. This is discussion only. Item 3A, 2024-0405, joint meeting with the PCDC Board and City Council regarding Executive Director recruitment, staffing, and the future structure of PCDC. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just kind of preface a little bit of this particular item so that we can kind of level set in the kind of conversation that I think will prove very fruitful for us. We're at a point in the history of Pflugerville and here within the PCDC that we haven't seen in over a decade. We're at an inflection point where our growth is about to expand by orders of magnitude as a city and as an economic entity. But we're also looking at replacing the senior executive leader of our organization. And I think it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we're taking a look at the organization itself, our relationship between the organization and City Council, to ensure that we're operating in the most efficient, effective manner possible. Because I think that we all can have violent agreement that it's shaping and putting us on a course for a prosperous economic future that all of us here on the dais this evening are aiming for. And I have full confidence that City Council and the rest of my board members are of that line of thinking. So with that, there are 3 primary elements mentioned in this particular item: recruitment, staffing, and future structure. And I just want to make sure that we understand that, the future structure piece, that is going to have a direct impact in terms of recruitment, because we'll need to be able to present a narrative to any potential candidate about what type of situation they'll be stepping into and what type of organization, what kind of responsibility they'll be called upon to execute in the performance of their duties. That'll also, I think, be important for staffing, so they understand what their positions and what their roles are going to be looking like. And it also helps us lay out a path for what types of direction do we want to go in the future. We've got CEDS 3.0 now, and how are we going to take that and implement it in an effective manner? And with that, I'll invite anyone else from the PCDC board, if they have any preliminary comments to make, to go ahead and make them now.
Very good. Hello, I'm Darrell White. I know everybody here. I would like to have everybody's undivided attention that is on the dais as well as here. As we have these conversations, and I thank Jeff very much for his comments, I want to thank all of you as the elected leaders in our community who serve. The focus we have at PCDC is to make sure that we're serving under the direction and guidance of the City Council. That is the way it's established right now. I hope as we have this conversation today, as we move forward, that'll be clear if there's anything that's changing in that regard. Because from the PCDC board's perspective, And from my perspective and insight, having been on both sides, the clear communication to this board as to what the city council wants is our objective. So as we go through these discussions, I hope you understand that that's where we're coming from as a board. Not that we are one organization we think is better than anything else. We are not. You're the ones that are elected. You've given us the privilege and honor of serving in the capacity of supporting you through the specific efforts of the economic development of our community. And as the president just mentioned, we are an extremely critical spot within this region for what we need to be doing as a city, being led through economic development, and we do not need distraction. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, with
So,
that,
Jeff, yeah,
I'm so sorry, Mr.
let me
Mayor.
go ahead and add my 2 cents
Please
to
do.
your introduction. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Of course, I know I sit on the PCDC board as well, which makes me kind of a hybrid member, I suppose. You're right, Jeff. I think that we have been for a long time at a critical crossroad in our community. I mean, I've seen it grow from you don't want to know when to now. But, and it's a very exciting time, I think, for everybody. It's a very challenging time in particular in a number of situations that we've had and opportunities that we've had. And so I think at this point, you're right. We're at that crossroad where we have the opportunity to recruit a new leader. We have the opportunity to restructure, if that's the will of the council. I know that that question's been raised, and in terms of whether there is a process to meld PCDC within the city somehow, and I'm sure there is. And but I think the structure, future structure, needs to be the first and foremost decision we make before we even think about recruitment and whatever else we need to decide. I'm sorry, Kim, you were going to say something.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you both for the introduction. I really appreciate that. Mr. White, I wanted to ask you exactly, as you ended, you mentioned distraction. I want to know what exactly is a distraction that you're mentioning or
Very good.
potential for?
Thank you very much for that question. So the distraction I'm talking about is simply the distraction of any organization that goes through a transition, either a transition of their objectives or with the leadership. And so my point is, whatever we do, let's do it in a way that minimizes the distraction, because that's the last thing we need. And I'm at this point where, having gone through many different changes in different organizations, do not see something as a disruption as a distraction. What I see as a distraction is when there is not clear communication on what is being wanted and done. And I think we can all achieve that very effectively if we just stay on point.
So, council, I think that what our PCDC board is asking us is for clear communication. And I would agree that probably over the years that hasn't been as clear. Okay, could have been clearer. But by the same token, over the years we've had different members on the PCDC board that perhaps were not in a position to understand what the message was.
That's fair.
You know, and Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair, I think, especially at this inflection point, to really keep in mind that, you know, kind of what's happened in the past has happened.
Right.
However, I think the key function, and I really appreciate Darrell's comments on that, clarity, transparency, certainty. With these elements, we'll work to move mountains for you. But those are the elements that we need. And when uncertainty, when ambiguity, and when opaqueness are there, and when we either can't see it clearly or it's not, you know, readily obvious, that's where delay and that's where, you know, indecision, that's where the issues that Darrell just pointed out tend to crop up. we have to make sure that this transition is done correctly and effectively. We can't mess this up. So I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted us to come here to have this conversation. Because what I want to walk away with is understanding. Okay, I know collectively exactly where you want us to go. Just point me in a direction, and I'll take the PCDC there. Not a problem. But I just need to know that I'm on the right direction.
Okay.
Now, the direction will change over time. Hey, we get that. But that's the second piece of this, is that as we begin this conversation tonight, I think I also want to establish perhaps let's say a reinforced relationship between the PCDC and the City Council, to where we have regular interaction, to where we're making sure checks and balances in what our understanding is and how we're operating and what your evaluation is. And plus, as things unfold, as we go through the passage of time, you can share that information with us so we can make the appropriate and necessary adjustments. I think we've all seen, especially in the last 2 years, how the time window for economic decisions is just shrinking. More than ever, we're going to have to be an effective, collaborative, communicative body. And those are my drivers for everything that we're going to talk about this evening.
Totally agree. Council, is there anyone else wishing to make
Just
have
one
some
thing
input?
I want to add to that, or maybe even challenge you, Jeff. I think you used a couple of words there: certainty and clarity. And I would challenge you a little bit on that. We served together on the PCDC in the past, Darrell, us as well, and there were times that the PCDC brought forward projects that were denied by the City Council. There were times that the PCDC approved projects that never even made it to the City Council.
Yes.
And maybe this is part of the later conversation, but I want to make sure that clarity means we want you to be aggressive, but not necessarily do exactly what we tell you to do, because I want the PCDC to be challenging us. I want it to be pushing us, and I want to make sure that we don't put certainty and clarity in the way of progress.
Understand completely. Could not agree more. And I apologize. I should probably preface that with degrees of certainty and clarity. The direction we want to go, we can't have a lot of opaqueness about that. The direction. There's a lot of room inside a direction to make decisions. And you'll be hearing about some things even this evening that you're not really aware of. But I think will help demonstrate that, so if I can wax on for just 90 seconds, Mr. Mayor. As a board member on the PCDC, I really think of myself as a consultant for the city. The idea is that I can come in and bring you perspectives and options. It's your responsibility to consider the options and make the best choice for the city. And that is what you've been empowered by the voters. I'm one of the voters, so I've empowered you to do that too. And I think it behooves you to have a wide range of options to select from. If you're only given a very narrow range of options, you're going to have a narrow range of outcomes that you can get there too, right? And with the wide variety of things that can happen in economic development, for example, that doesn't give you an opportunity to pivot or really address when changes occur. So we're very cognizant of that. The PCDC is an independent body. And I think that's something, at least within my very short tenure as president, that we've operated under, and that we will continue to do so. I'll guarantee that.
Mayor, I'll say this. I think that, from my perspective, a lot of times what I'm seeing is two ships passing the night. And so there are things that we don't come to a common agreement on what a specific term is, perspective, ideas. So it just we keep rotating back and forth on things right there as well. So I welcome the opportunity for clarity. I'll also say this. I think that's the reason why we did what we did regarding having this iteration of this board. I feel very comfortable with city council members on this board. I feel very comfortable with the members, all of you folks on this board as well, to be able to go ahead and make sound decisions. And Doug, I like the way you put it right there. Challenge us on things, because that's your job.
Yes, it is.
Your focus is to try to see what's amazing, what's extreme, what is possible out there for that as well. I think that we've refined what we want to see, ultimately from PCDC and working on there, and that we are a team, and it's necessary for a team. People don't like arguments. I disagree. I like constructive arguments all the time because that's where you get a lot of the great ideas and concepts going together. I love that kind of debate. Honestly, you see it on this dais all the time. From there as well. That's great. That's healthy. That's healthy conversations. What's not healthy is like what you said before about, mistrust, misunderstanding, trying to disconnection right there as well. I don't see that happening with this iteration of the board. That's my personal opinion, and I've said this to you before personally. Like, I mean, which you guys are the eyes of the board. What you see, hey, I trust what your judgment is because you're on there for that, and I look forward to, because something that we keep reiterating is that when it comes to economic development and it deals with the other aspect, I don't care if it's PCDC, I don't care if it's the city. Someone's got to do it, and they need to be on the same page in doing how we walk about those things. So that's what I like about this conversation.
I have a question. Has the board gotten together? Will you be coming tonight with some recommendations for what it is you're suggesting?
I have opinions on that, ma'am. My opinions, however, are my own. I have not brought the board together in any official capacity for us to discuss those options. One of the things that I think, as the mayor pointed out, is really important is that we have a line of sight as to what the structure of PCDC will be moving forward. Once we have clarity on that, then I think we have the opportunity to essentially pull the levers and make some tweaks and adjustments in order to how we're going to interoperate, as well as how we're going to present to external candidates what type of opportunity we're presenting. And that's one that it's really beginning to play more and more top of mind for me, because the individual that we end up selecting for that role, there's going to be a giant weight on their shoulders and a lot of responsibility, and they're going to have to make decisions in a pretty short period of time. So we will need to be able to attract a really high level of talent, and I want to make sure that we've got the gravitas in order to be able to do that.
So there's two things that you said I made notes on. One, I'm just going to, you said a narrow range of options provides for a narrow range of outcomes. I disagree with that statement. I think options are still, the outcomes are still infinite, but that's a philosophical discussion, and I recognize that. The thing that I am curious about, though, is in your opening statement, you said the time window for economic decisions is shrinking, and whenever, more than ever, we need to work together collaboratively and closely. So as the mayor's often said, things happen at warp speed, right? And that, as you pointed out, that's even more evident now than before. Do you think, and I know you said you had personal opinions on structure, and we haven't met as a board to outline them, but do you think that the structure that we currently have is not as conducive to making those decisions? In that the PCDC staff works diligently to put together deal points, presents those to the PCDC board, which puts their thumbprint on it and sends it back sometimes to get it narrowed in. Then it comes back to the PCDC board, and then we have to wait up to 2 weeks before council can have a chance on it if the PCDC recommend it. Do you think that structure in and of itself is not conducive to this rapid deployment of decisions?
So I think that particular thread that you're tugging on, I think is one of those that we could actually take a look at to see what types of alterations might we be able to make in order to be able to respond even faster. If you're asking from a larger perspective, is the PCDC as it's currently structured the optimal configuration? If you'd like my personal professional opinion on that, I'd say yes, it is.
No one else? Question?
Yeah, I'm trying. So do we have? Are we just talking about our thoughts in general?
No, we've got to decide on the structure.
We're at. I'd like to suggest that we're on topic one right now, which is structure. And I think Jim's question is actually a pretty good segue to that.
Okay.
And let's make sure, because Rudy, I'm so glad you mentioned this. Constructive conversations are how we get tough things done. You know, when I'm coaching and I'm consulting on organizational transformation, I tell folks, you got to go through a crucible in order to grow. If you don't go through something difficult that stretches your capabilities, you're not going to become more than you were when you start. And I think that's something that, we need to understand, that we're going to have difference of opinion. We may be able to close some gaps all the way. We may not be able to close some gaps. But the critical thing is that we do it in a very objective manner, and it's in a respectful manner, and it's one that drives us to a collective best decision for the city. And I can guarantee no single individual in this room knows the best decision for the city. And I think that's one thing I always keep in mind, that I may think my idea is the best, but it's only the best in my mind. It's not necessarily the best when it actually touches reality, because I understand completely what a really crazy world reality is. So with that, I'd like to have the conversation, because it's been brought up, starting with, the couple of city council sessions ago, where there was mention of a transfer of some capability. And it looks like we may want to, or I'm asking this to the council. What is your opinion about how we're structured? Mr. McDonald asked me, did I think that the current configuration was the right one? Well, 403B, independent corporation with a board, empowered to act, and it's essentially kind of a self-autonomous little unit that runs off, completely answering to the city council. And yes, I believe that is the correct one. However, that's just my singular belief. I won't speak for my other board members. With that, and Mr. Rogers, yes.
Let me say, I don't see anything wrong with the structure as we've got it. Of course, I would probably. I think the structure works. I think who we have operating the machinery makes a huge difference. And on this, I would probably defer to Mr. White more than anybody else, who has worked now with all four of the executive directors on the PCDC, off and on the board for a very, very long time. If he thinks the structure doesn't work, well, he's been there more than anybody else, and I'm going to say, okay, if Darrell doesn't think the structure works, we're going to go with Darrell's recommendation to change. At least that would be my inclination. But I don't see anything that tells me that the structure isn't working. There have been some personality conflicts here and there, and some people, are better prepared to jump onto the PCDC than others at different times. I would say, in all sincerity, that I'm not certain that I was the best pick for the PCDC when the city council put me on there. But it was a long time ago, and the city was much, much smaller back then,
and city
and the
council.
budget was very much
So
smaller.
just to be clear, because I think we're kind of speaking very opaque. When you say structure, are we talking about whether or not
All right.
it should be an internal department?
Right.
Or to say
Rudy,
it's
Rudy,
external?
let me-
Talking about 403B.
Yeah,
and-
I'll address the elephant in the room. What he's asking, I believe, based on what we're asking. Okay, let's just put it out there. Are we going to continue how we're going? Are we going to do away with the current structure the PCDC is
As
set
an
up?
external entity.
But
Yes,
define
as an
structure.
Yeah.
external.
That's why I want to hear.
This is what Mr. Thompson is asking for, direction. What do we want to do going forward? Are we going to just keep it as it is? Are we going to restructure how it is? And then once we restructure, who answers to who? I mean, these are all the questions I believe you're asking for.
Thank you, Mr.
That
Reeds.
you want direct direction.
Direction,
for.
yes.
Yes, you want immediate direction for, so that we can continue on with this conversation and go out and seek out a new leader or not, or however we want to do it. So basically what
will
he's
they be
asking
working
for,
for the city or not?
yes, and so he's asking for us to make that
Rudy,
decision
so-
tonight.
So if I'm understanding, the question is, who does the executive director report to?
Well,
That will be a part of the conversation.
that'd be part of it, but what I'm hearing you say is that whether or not it continues to be its own separate entity,
Right.
or it becomes a
Well, structurally, what's different than
structured
it being
from
a
that.
different entity and not a different entity is who the executive director reports to.
Correct.
Correct.
Well,
Yes.
and whether or not there's that buffer.
Yeah, that's
A second
it's a
pair
layer.
of, a second group of eyes.
Yes.
The board is.
Well, the board
you know,
always.
They serve at
the
the
board always
pleasure of the
exists by
council,
statute.
but they are
Right.
independent, in a way that, a city department is not.
So let me ask this, Serena.
Thank you.
There's a few points. It will always, under state statute, be a separate entity.
A separate entity. Okay.
There's,
Can I add something
yeah,
just for
so there
purposes?
seems to be some language that we
Yeah.
probably need to
Yeah.
clarify.
And let me just add one thing, and I don't know if it'll help the conversation or hinder the conversation, but I'll say anyway. So, every year for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I give a presentation at the TML Economic Development Conference. And it deals with this very specific issue. And in that role, I'm talking about legal issues and policy issues, as opposed to when I'm acting as city attorney or general counsel, where it's more legal approach. But I just pulled up my PowerPoint presentation, because one of the things I ask after I go sort of the initial process of what is an economic development corporation, where does it get its authority? I ask this question of the audience. I ask them, is the Economic Development Corporation a distinct and separate corporation from the city? I ask that very question, and I have people raise their hand if for or against, and there's who doesn't know, and we get a variety of different raising hands, and then I go through the statute. And this is I just want everybody to know what the statute says, because, we have to start with the law. And I think starting with the law helps give you a perspective of sort of answers to these questions. So the local government code says there's an authorizing unit. In this case, the authorizing unit is the city council. Section 501.051 says that the city council authorizes the creation of the corporation. The city council, through the tax code, authorizes the election to adopt the sales tax. They approve the certificate of formation and any amendments thereto. They appoint and may remove the directors for whatever reason they choose to do so. They can approve the bylaws unilaterally. I believe they can change the bylaws without having to get approval from the EDC board. They approve all programs and expenditures. All programs and expenditures have to be approved by the city council. And you're required to annually review all the financial statements, and you're entitled to access to all the books of the corporation at any time as a body. And then finally, this is the weird part, but with all of that, you cannot lend your credit or grant any public money to them except under a 380 agreement, under Chapter 380.2. And so I go through all that, and then I ask the question again: is an economic development corporation a separate and distinct corporation from the city? And I can assure you that after I give all that, there may be a different philosophical discussion associated with degrees of separation, right? But the answer is usually no, they're not separate and distinct, because city council ultimately has complete and total control over every aspect of that corporation. In my mind, the perspective from structure is, how do you want the organization to work together? And if you want to appoint folks who can give different perspectives, like you have done already, and that includes members of the city council, right? I don't think that necessarily excludes employees or members of the city council for purposes of the board structure. But ultimately, how does that system operate, to your point, Councilmember McDonald, in an efficiency standpoint? You're always going to have the board, always. Statute requires you to have a board, right? Statute requires at least 3 of those folks not be employees or officers of the corporation. That's always going to be there. So that, you can't fix, if that needs to be fixed, if that's something that needs to be fixed, that is what it is, and it's stuck where it's stuck. So the question is, how does the corporation and the city council then integrate itself? And in my perspective, so the answer to the question is always, oh no, it's not separate and distinct. It's really this part of the city, right? From a high level sort of perspective. But then, how do you integrate the corporation with the city to ensure everybody's on the same page, rowing the boat in the same direction, which I know is in the interest of this board and the city manager and any executive director that I've dealt with. And that's where, in my opinion, you come into the matter of degrees. Does the economic development, to your point, Councilmember Weiss, does the EDC director work directly for the corporation, report directly to the corporate board, hired by them? Or is that a shared employee that is also an economic development director for the city and reports to somebody in the city, but also has the role and responsibility of handling duties for the board? Or are they completely separate? And I can tell you, in my experience, I've experienced all of it. From one end of the spectrum, completely and totally separate EDC, separate buildings, separate everything. The city doesn't provide payroll. They do everything on their own. To the other opposite end of the spectrum, where essentially, especially with a type A corporation, you can see the city council actually sitting as the actual board. And the city's providing all those services through a services agreement. And then somewhere in the middle. And I can tell you this, they all work for the community that chooses to do it in the way that they choose it to do it that way. And I think that's what and I'm sorry if I've said way too much, and I apologize, but I think that's kind of where you're at right now, is trying to determine where does that structure work for this community, and how will it best work for this council, ultimately, since you get to make that decision, to move the city forward in economic development through the use of economic development sales tax. And now I'll shut up, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Zach.
I know that we've talked before about some redundancies, and we specifically regarding from it. Was it treasurer? What is that person?
Finance.
Finance. Finance, and we were talking. And one of the things that we've had consternations on through the years is Serena will come to us and say there was a specific model and way that they should be incorporating or showing their budgets. There would be a battle about, well, no, this is the way we do our budgets. To us, we're kind of like, why are we even having this conversation? If the city does budget this way, let's just do it all this way. I don't understand why a design or how a budget presented should be that different from what the city's doing from there. And had those conversations. We've also had conversations where when PCDC was down to like 2 people, years ago about, well, okay, who's going to be in charge of the phones? What's the conversation to? What kind of staff do we have? And it was just kind of there, and other aspects with it. I think at least from my standpoint, always been concerned is that I get frustrated not seeing everyone rowing in the same direction about these things, and having a direct report to the city manager. I mean, I think that may help, but also at the same time, I also know that having looking at this as just a sub-department for one of our assistant city managers, I don't think that's at that level. I think that you should, this is an important department, an important structure that's separate from some of the other things that we have from there, and I think that it involves that. I just want to hear from your standpoint. That's the reason why I asked you, because what do you think? I mean, we've got perspectives, but you're the one from the day-to-day basis is going to be working.
So I echo what Charlie's saying, and I've worked in different models. I'm not here to advocate one way or another. What I can tell you is that there's an economies of scale, whether that be IT or marketing, legal, finance, et cetera. So you'll see cities that have those departments support those functions because you have a full IT team or you have a full finance team, and we did that transition with finance. You'll see cities such as Frisco, Georgetown, Cedar Park, Mesquite, Sugar Land. They all report to an assistant city manager as an economic director. So just to your point, for example, though, even a police chief in Georgetown, Cedar Park, Round Rock, they also report to an assistant city manager. So we've kind of do it a little bit different here because I have 6 direct reports. But I won't go into the debate of whether or not, but that model exists is what I'm saying. And just like Charlie said, that matters to that community, how you want to do that. So that model exists. If you're asking me to maybe write out what it could look like in some sort of integration, but not this, I keep hearing words, what I got nervous about is like this separate entity. I want to echo what Charlie's saying. The council has all of the decisions of a recommending body on every
I
expenditure.
think you've made that.
Okay,
quite
I just-
clear to us. I think you made
So
that quite
I-
clear to us on numerous
Because I'm hearing
occasions.
this
I want to be
separate-
clear on that because we do need to focus on the terminology and the vocabulary because you said complete control. Except all spending, we have the authority to approve all their spending. We don't have the authority to mandate their spending.
I would disagree. I think that's a nuanced point, but and let me explain why I think that's a nuanced point.
Okay.
They can't spend anything unless you approve it. And I'm not talking about this board. I'm not talking about y'all. I'm
Can
just
we
talking
approve
about in
things that
general.
they did not
If-
approve?
We've done that.
Yes.
If a corporation comes
No, we
to city
never have.
council and they say we want to do X and city council says no, and they come back and we want to do X and city council says no, and they come back and they say we want to do X and city council says no, we want you to do Y. I think we've made you pretty clear we want you to do Y, and they say no, we're not going to do Y. The solution to that is replace the board with people who are going to do Y. So that's why I
Right.
think it's a nuanced. I think it's
But
a
the
nuanced.
spending still originates with the board.
It does. That's an accurate
And
statement.
if we don't like what they're saying, then
Yes.
we have the control to replace the
Yes.
board, but the spending still originates with the board. I feel like that's a very important
I'm with
point.
Charlie. We have the King's X. We've shown that. There's been occasion. That's why I disagree.
No,
with
we
you.
never
We have the
have.
King's X.
We never
No, I
have. We
think-
have never replaced the board to affect specific spending priorities. We've never.
I'm going to agree with Doug very
No.
strongly here
We-
because the point.
We replaced a board member
I think-
following a decision, but that decision was already
Before
complete.
that, Rudy was on a board where I was in the room, everyone was
Yeah.
dismissed from the board.
Yeah, we've done it.
No,
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Sir. What year was that? That was 16
it was
or 17?
2015,
Yeah.
and only 5 of the 7 members were dismissed at that time.
Doug was one of the ones who was kept.
I was still there, as was George.
What we're saying again is the King's X. The King's X relies with us, and that's what you're saying. Which
Yeah,
is
that's-
true.
that's simply my
That's
point.
it. We've
Yeah.
got the King's X, and so if we don't,
And I'm
like
saying we have
something,
never
we've
done that before.
And I would say that it's
Just disagree.
Okay.
That's fine.
In order to affect
it's
spending.
not wise
Can I
to
just
exercise
summarize?
Counsel.
that power on a regular basis.
Okay.
So just to summarize,
We
you-
look for board members to have experience that council members don't have. And, a couple of us have, business experience. A couple of us have legal experience. But we look for the board to bring us a experience in the business world and the development world that is outside of what the council members have. Council members have to deal with all kinds of issues that PCDC board members don't have to deal with, but the reverse is also true. And I think it's very appropriate for us to rely on them and their expertise, which is very different from ours.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with their conversation.
All right. Hold on.
Contending differently.
Hold on.
So I'll summarize to say there's a lot of different ways to do this. What I do think is important, I echo President Thompson's comment about if you're attempting to do what I hope to be a national search for an economic development director to get the very, very best that we can possibly get for this community, you are going to have to, in fairness to that candidate, make a decision and not change it within 6 months.
Thank you very much. I agree.
So today, if y'all are leaning towards some sort of, I strongly recommend at least a decision for the sake of that candidate pool that they know who they're reporting to.
Did you just drop at the end and make sure we don't change our decision in 6 months?
I might have.
I just wanted to make sure
And
I
that's a
heard you
lot
say
to
it.
ask.
Yeah.
It's a lot
It
to
is.
ask. And that's why I'm saying, I'm not necessarily
Yeah.
one way or the other, I'm just saying pick one.
I mean, a national search is going to take 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
to begin with, so
But
we're
but I'm
talking
gonna
about
put.
not moving the ball on them.
Exactly.
We're a year. We're at least a year out.
I would say if you do this professionally and you do a recruitment brochure, we could probably leave that out, you're right. By the time that they're in the panel process, I would say that's when it needs to happen. Panel process, 2 months.
And I'm so sorry, I would also suggest that part of that panel process is going to be getting their input on what they need in order to be successful, because they're going to come to you with a preconceived idea about what it looks like. So part of your vetting process is, are you aligned enough with us in order that we can work together effectively? Because if you really want to go way over here, then okay, next up, please. And I think that's a fair thing to do. And I think it also sets a very fair expectation for the candidate so they understand. And look, they're going to be realistic about it. They're going to know there's a lot of variance, right? But they do need to have guardrails, just like any highway does. You got to have guardrails. And I think if we establish those and we can draw the center line as well, that puts us in a driver's seat to make sure we get candidates that are viable, that are quality, and they're actually going to be somewhat productive working with us to make this happen.
So
Let me ask this: the service agreement we have with PCDC. I know that covers finance now. It's covered a lot of other ancillary services, HR, whatnot. What other support services are not covered by that agreement? Because I would expect that we should include IT, we should include HR, we should include.
should we include legal?
Probably not. Maybe janitorial. I don't know.
Sure.
So sorry, that's actually a very good question, Mr. Metamayor. Charles, what do you think about that?
Oh, wait a minute. About what?
You can't.
The legal.
I can't ask
separate.
him a question?
Sorry.
We had that conversation.
You can
I don't
have-
think that's his
What do you think
decision.
about
So
being the lawyer for
I'm-
the
I'm-
PCDC and the city?
Yeah, there are pros
There's
and
pros and
cons to
cons.
that approach.
okay, that's the answer we're looking for.
But what
We've
services
lived,
are not
we've lived
included?
through it.
When I can.
We've lived through it.
Okay, who
I
was?
would say IT is managed by a contract with PCDC. I would strongly suggest the city do IT for them. We manage quite a large IT system. I would suggest IT. I don't have a pro or con to legal. I have my opinions, but
What's your opinion?
It's done both ways. I will tell you. It's,
Wow.
It's,
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's
Are
done.
you a lawyer?
Let me.
This might be one of those opaque times.
Yeah,
so-
If the board and the council are
it's-
in momentum together, I would support same attorney. So
Man,
there's.
but the minute you get,
And that's,
There's-
and
The
that's
minute
my,
you
and
get-
that's my
That's-
concern. That's the only concern I have.
yeah, no,
just
no,
like
the minute
said.
you get,
Yeah.
any sort of conflict, but for the lawyers on the board, I don't think that you can ever have I don't think you can ever have an actual conflict of interest under our rules because ultimately this city council,
Really? 'Cause you
right?
think
Because
the city
ultimately,
council's the real-
because the city council
really
has
the client?
is really the client and has all the authority over the board.
All day long.
All the authority. Having said that, however, the minute there is a conflict between the
Yeah.
two boards, I think it gets really hairy for the lawyer and creates a problem. And so I agree with her. If everybody's symbiotic, and that's the word that I use when I'm everyone's rowing down the road, I think it's probably very efficient. But the minute you get a conflict, it's a problem.
Yeah, I don't think a couple uses the same divorce lawyer.
No. Well, no. Well, that's why I say the minute there's a conflict, right?
That's what any of us say.
I'm telling you that.
Married people use the same lawyer for financial decisions
Well, yeah.
and for all but the minute there's a conflict, they got different
Doug
lawyers.
and I experienced that years ago with a certain attorney.
Yeah, we had.
The second item, the second item I would
Wait,
say
y'all were
that's
married?
still separate. The second item I would say that's still separate
PCDC
is marketing or communications. We have a communications team that could also do that function as well. So there's a little bit of, you could also talk about executive assistant positions. You know, we don't have executive assistant positions for a small division like that, so you could marry those as well. So there's various degrees of services that could be combined.
So
Now
Samantha,
that then gets into co-location.
Right.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. 'Cause
Right.
you mentioned executive assistant, and so is that just me? Because that would be part of the conversation too. Is where I know you've had the conversation where should PCDC lay ultimately when we get our new city hall and other things.
Right, so here, I think a lot of this conversation is constructive. I think some of it is probably the duty or responsibility of whoever the new executive director is to help us determine and shape out. And we don't need to get too deeply into the weeds here to make these decisions today. I think the a couple people have touched on it. I think the high level decision we need to make tonight in terms of directing and setting the stage, if you will, for that clarity that everyone's seeking is, will the new executive director report to the PCDC board, or will the new executive director report to either the city manager or the deputy city manager? And I'm unclear about where that should be. I have my own personal opinion, but basically report to someone on city staff. I think that's the first decision we need to make, because once we make that, then whoever we hire can decide, well, here's efficiencies of process, and, well, we've had this problem, and for instance, if we decide that the new ED needs to report to to city staff, whether the city manager or deputy city manager, then they can say, well, here are efficiencies that we could be gained by, for overlapping things, whether it be marketing or social media or IT or security
service.
or painting the outside of the building or co-locating the office or whatever, right? That's kind of what I see as that leadership function of whoever that person is coming in. And so all of that, I think we can sweep off to the side for now. That's personally, I don't think it's my duck, right? That's for the new executive director to make a recommendation to me.
So
The decision we need to make, in my humble opinion, tonight is, who does that executive director report to? Is that a direct report to this board, or is it direct report to city staff?
Well,
I would like to-
CCDC right now, what do you think?
Mr. White.
Thank you, Mayor. To that point, and actually, before I touch on that, I do want to, Charlie, thank you for the explanation of the statutes. That was exactly the way, I may have been in the same session you were teaching. But there is a liability element, and so there is a shield, if you will, up to a certain point from the standpoint of the city. City is still on the line financially. It's just a matter of how the clawbacks have to work because we go through the corporation. Am I correct on that, Charlie? That basically, I think it's limited to what the amount would be from the sales tax. That would be
Yeah, I think it depends on, I just would need a better understanding of what you mean by, liability. I mean,
Just from the standpoint of projects that have been initiated contractually through PCDC, and if there are now obligations that come back.
yeah, those are all corporation obligations. Those are performance agreements that are into between the corporation and a particular business entity. So,
Correct, but
yeah.
my point though is that the city's exposure is limited in an annual basis to the payout to those, as from what I understood in reading different documents as well, was to what that revenue was that the PCDC had come in. My point is, it does operate as a legal entity, the PCDC does.
Yeah.
And yes, it is controlled completely by city council. That's what I want to say there. Now, to the point that Councilmember McDonald was mentioning, and thank you all for your attention. I very much appreciate when I have everybody's over here, even listening to what people are saying, whether it's me or anybody else. What I can tell you from personal experience on both sides, from the city council standpoint, and I want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that what I say or what I think really doesn't matter, because I understand completely that is, once the city council votes and they establish what it is, that's what it will be. And I will be great with that, whatever that decision is. What I can tell you is this: when the PCDC reports directly to the city council has direct or connection input as to what's going on. Once that position goes under the city manager, the only person you can talk to is the city manager. Now, you may be allowed to speak with them at different things, but if you're not pleased, for example, with the performance of the ECDC side, PCDC side, that's an issue with the city manager if you set it up that way. But if you keep it separate, you have a direct connection. That's all I want to say about that.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to allow Adam an opportunity to speak. I know you wanted to say something, and then I'd like to go ahead and just put it out there and present a motion,
Well, there's no action on
Oh.
this item, but,
suggestion, recommendation, mine.
well,
You,
I guess we could do that on 2B, right?
Okay.
there's action on the contract for.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
but
we
this
can-
is,
We can direct it.
Getting ahead.
and I think this is noticed well enough that if council wanted to give some direction, they could do so under this item.
yes.
Worst case, you could wait until the agenda when I think it does say action, but I think we've given enough notice to the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Ed?
no, I guess just the statement I want to say too is, as we think about the direction, whether it reports to the city council or whether it remains separate, I feel like too, we should really think about this because it also affects the candidate pool. This is going to direct, the next 3, 5, 10 years of Pflugerville. Like, what kind of candidate, when we think about the structure, do we want
Expand on that.
in terms of?
You said it's affecting the candidate. You obviously are thinking about how so.
So the reason the way I'm thinking about it, if it just reports up to the city manager or the deputy city manager, it's a different personality than somebody who is completely separate from the city council. It's a different personality, and the question is, and I don't know how, Serena, you mentioned Frisco, Cedar Park, and I know those are also huge successes too. I don't know how they're run, but the question is, what type of candidate do you all want when it comes to our next executive director? So I think I think structure is really important, and we should really think about, like, hey, if we're trying to be the next success story in Central Texas, what do we want? Are we really trying to hold anybody back?
Okay. Kim?
Okay, then, can I at least then ask that we, while we're creating this, that we simply consider the possibility of integrating those three things that Serena mentioned, which was IT, finance, and marketing, and leave the structure as it is so that we can have a great pool of candidates to choose from.
One question about that, Kimberly. Would you also want to roll in HR in that too?
I thought it already was.
It already is. Okay, yeah. Just want to make sure that. Okay, got it.
And as far as the structure, to leave it as it is.
That sounds like a great idea to me.
What are you saying?
I was going to say, I like the thought of that. I like the fact that it gives us time to consider the next candidate that the board should choose to lead the way for PCDC, whether or not we want to come back to this discussion at a later time. That leaves us the option open. I will say, you made a great point, Adam, and, I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I was actually thinking about that same thing of, if we decide to go the route of the executive director reporting straight to an assistant city manager, well, I don't like that really a whole lot, because then I got to go to Serena to ask for permission to speak to the assistant city manager to ask for permission to speak to who's in charge of the executive director. I don't like that whole thing, and that's in our charter. You're right. I mean, that's where I'm going back to. It's in our charter, and we're required to do that. I like the fact that I can call Amy up even when I was just a regular city council member. But at the same time, if there's something that came up, to your question, and I really wanted it on the agenda to address it when it comes to PCDC, all it takes is 2 board members or city council members to force it onto the agenda, unless the mayor says, well, but it takes basically 2 city council members. If right now, as it is, let's just consider that I'm not on the PCDC board. If I wanted something changed with PCDC, I could harp all day long to you and to Amy, and if you don't want to do anything, nothing's going to happen. So there are pros and cons to this whole thing. Now, I do like the fact that we're given time to look at it right now. I do like that possibly a slow integration maybe in the future. But yeah, I certainly do see pros and cons to that, Adam. I don't know. I think you look like you want to say something. So
I have a question. Like, it seems like the momentum is that we want it to be more. What is it broken?
I would say to Councilmember Rogers, who thinks it's perfect, I would say if you've noticed that it's perfect, then you're not paying attention. I mean,
Well, thank you for putting those words in my mouth, but those are not the words that
well,
you
you
used.
alluded to it. So
I don't think that the
I mean-
structure needs to be changed. I did acknowledge that there have been issues, but those seem to me to be primarily personality issues, not issues that are generated by the structure of the PCDC. And we have board members. I think we have an extraordinary board.
Well,
I don't know if we have the best board we've ever had, but it's certainly close.
I think it is.
there are some, you know, I don't have the benefit that Mr. White and Mr. Weiss have of having served a decade or more on a variety of different boards to have that view.
Well-
But I think that to Councilwoman Member Holliday's point, I think that the integration of IT makes a lot of sense. I would shy away from the integration of marketing because I think the marketing that the PCDC does is very different than the marketing that the city does.
Expand.
We have a very different, they have a different target. Right, the city's marketing is really about informing the citizens and the people of Central Texas about what Pflugerville is about, and the PCDC is more a business target, and it's national or even international. So I think that you know, it's a different mindset and a different kind of expertise. Not to say that there couldn't be consultation back and forth, but I wouldn't think that it would be advisable to make a single marketing department for all of that. But IT, sure.
Okay.
So I would say, and to that point, marketing, sorry, we were discussing a little bit about that. So marketing, I think maybe a hybrid approach. I think operationally, you know, the city's marketing team can certainly handle that. I think messaging and targeting maybe still stays with the PCDC, but I think it's a hybrid approach.
And I would suggest that attendance at certain conferences and other events, you would want to have an economically developed, trained individual in that role. And that it's one thing to, and Mr. Mayor, I'm going to bring up something you and I have had a conversation about. I think that membership on this board is probably the most complex job assignment that you can get, and in terms of a board membership, because really of the unique skills that it calls for. Economic development is not just something anybody can fall into, or pick up a pamphlet or pick up a Gartner slick, read it, and all of a sudden you know what to do. And there's a lot that goes into it, and there's so much that goes into that complex system that it does take a pretty unique set of skills and experiences to do. And I think, you know, one of the things we've seen over the last decade is that the pool of available candidates to, you know, from the citizenry to be on the board has not been, let's say, as large as we'd like it to be. I mentioned this to the mayor in a discussion in which I also said how we position, and I think this goes to the structure of the organization as well, what we do in terms of setting up the ability to begin to foster and nurture and develop candidates to serve on the board is something we need to be looking at as well. What kind of things can we do to engage citizens to step up, then put them in positions to where they can begin to learn these skills so that after a period of time, they'd be suited candidates to step in and operate as a PCDC board member. Look, and that's a Pandora's box, and I only mention that because I think you want to keep it in mind in terms of a structure, because as an inbound economic development executive, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at is, okay, making an assumption, I'm responsible to a board. That's who I'm reporting to. Who's that board? How are they made up? Am I going to have just this kind of thing? Or am I going to have something like this? So there's some real aspects to that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to cede the floor now. Thank you.
So the only thing I would say is this, and Darrell actually said a lot of that too, Caesar, about to your point. He's the one who said some of those comments regarding who reports to who and how that would actually look at who you're talking to, which was very informative on that.
He says it more eloquently than I do.
I'll be quiet. You're fine. I understand, and I've heard the concerns for the years regarding the redundancies, and that's to the point, Charlie. That's really when I talk about structures, and that's what I'm talking about. I mean, literally, I would hear about, okay, this person does the same thing we do here. Why can't we go together? So, looking from a structure, even though it's kabuki theater, realistically speaking, it's still nonetheless that redundancy is, you know, something that I feel like we can go ahead and start to get rid of. I feel like that there's no need for that. I was surprised about marketing because I got a message the other day, and I don't know if this has been announced or not from here, but it's on a website and we're over there as well. That whole Explore Pflugerville campaign just got a Hermes Award, which is the highest you can get when it comes to marketing. I mean, that's a huge deal.
And what is it?
Not herpes, Hermes.
Not that.
Greek mythology.
But that's like Disney level. I mean, that's huge. And so I don't see. I disagree with you when you were saying that. Well, their marketing is different. Apparently not, because you got one of the highest awards you can get in marketing, and this city just got it for the Explore Pflugerville campaign, which we had like a 2-hour debate about what that would look like and everything else over there. So whatever we decided, apparently people like it out there, and they got one of the highest awards in the industry. So I don't have any qualms with that. I think that what I just want to make sure that we're clear of is this: how many times have we had conversations either here or offsite, in our retreats or anything like that about, okay, who's responsible to go ahead and get this stuff done? Economic development. What are we talking about here? Like, one group is saying, I do this here, the other group is saying it over here, and we've always said as council, we don't care, we just want it done. Like, I mean, we want people to be able to have a cohesive message, a cohesive idea of what that is well. And that's the part, that's my only apprehension of not having it report directly to Serena or what the assistant city manager or anybody else with that, because I just want to be able to have an accountability standpoint and say, listen, you're in charge of this. What's going on here with that? Because that's my frustration, is how many times we've had that conversation. Now, I'm willing to go ahead and give it a chance to say, hey, listen, let's meld what we need to. Let's get it organized. Let's go open up and see what comes out from there. But from an accountability standpoint, I just want to make sure we all get, to your point, we're all get on the same page regarding these actions and work together. I don't see, there, as you've always said to us, there shouldn't be any daylight between the two on these things.
If I may, Mayor, and I apologize, last comment, unless you ask me something. It is not fair to an executive director, though, to have 14 bosses. That executive director should not have 7 there. The director should not have 7 here. That can't happen. And so I know you're saying accountability, but y'all need to pinpoint then who. I can't imagine trying to navigate what our executive directors had to do with 7 board members and 7 council members and manage economic development.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that this 7 PCDC board members and the 7 council members will never be on the same page regarding that. I can guarantee you, because especially up here, you have turnover elections and you don't know what you're going to get, believe me.
And
It can
Councilmember
be an-
Terry, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Is an
I apologize.
executive director really an executive director if they're reporting to a deputy city manager? And
Yes. And
And
many
you still
cities
be
do that.
executive director.
Cedar Park. So you brought up Cedar Park, and I remember years ago when Cedar Park had that little brouhaha, I'll put it that way, and they brought and they brought everything back in. I to that point, Cedar Park's been doing pretty well, and that happened several years ago with that.
And I'm not advocating like Mesquite's another large city. I mean, there's many out there. And typically it's, I don't mean to downplay what it's just like another department. We have police and communicate. I mean, you find it, you have a whole lot of directors in a city. So I do believe it has still the prestige. It's, in my opinion, you're going to actually have more candidates that will work for a single entity. I'm not supporting it than a turnover board. Turnover boards are tough. By charter, you can't add another position reporting to the council, and I definitely don't think you find an economic development director that will answer to a council.
Serena, did we not change their bylaws where ultimately if they were trying to get rid of their executive director, it would ultimately have to be approved by us?
Yes,
You did change it, right?
the council, I don't know if it was changed, I don't know the word change or
I'll
not.
look at.
We did.
But
Right.
it actually, let me be very clear, it has to be approved by both. It's not
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but
Approved by both.
again, we
There's
have the
no
king-
unilateral decision
Yeah,
there.
yeah, we have the King's X.
King's X.
No,
You know,
no,
no.
the opposite of that.
Both
It
approved.
cannot be a unilateral decision.
But then you could just
It
defund
has
it.
to be the board and the council.
Okay.
You could-
so
I mean, there's-
I'm gonna go with
Oh,
Charlie.
and then
I'm
you're gonna,
Charlie.
and then you're gonna replace the whole board?
I'm not sure I'm not sure much I appreciate that, but, yeah.
With the way it's written.
We've done it before.
Yeah, it can be, I mean, it can be done. In the end, but you've got a great council here. I don't know all of these, I don't know one of these, and I don't know that I know Adam that well, but we have a good We've got a good board.
Pretty cool.
I've been representing economic development corporations in cities in various capacities for 23 years now, I think. And here's what I found, is that regardless of how y'all decide y'all want this set up, you can make it work for you, but you have to, because you can be successful with it. It's shown in other cities, however things are set up differently, and it's successful. The things I think that you have to do, and you danced around it, but didn't say it directly, everybody has to communicate and collaborate together. That's on the staff level. If you have a separate economic development director for over there and a city manager here, they have to be communicating on a regular basis. On a board level, between the city council and the board, I always recommend that when I'm giving this speech, that EDCs and city councils meet at least 4 times a year, quarterly, to make sure everyone's on the same page. Communication has to be a two-way street. Everybody needs to get feedback on exactly what they're doing, both at the staff level and on the board levels. City council has to set clear goals and objectives for the EDC board to follow, to your point. Also, to your point, everybody needs to understand what their role is. And then I always say this at the very end, and I'm not directing it to y'all, though you can take it that way if you want. I then say, council, once you have approved, this is what I say at this presentation, once the city council has appointed these individuals that they believe have the knowledge and experience and information to sit on that board, let them do their job. Don't micromanage them. And those are sort of my final thoughts I give, at that presentation.
Thank you for that. Also, just want to add, one of the questions that came up for me when we talk about integrating departments, I'm always thinking about the person behind the position. And so one of my questions was, and I did get clarity with that, was that no position would be eliminated. No one's hours were going to be cut.
We're not the University of Texas.
So, right. I wanted to just put that out there.
Well, but,
Charles,
Let's talk about it.
sir, excuse me. Pardon.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Holliday, what you're just touching on is an excellent point. And I know this is going to be an agenda item that's under the consent agenda under 5A. But at the moving of an FTE from PCDC to the city is in there. And if you vote on consent and don't address that particular item, it's approved. So that's not eliminating a position, but it's moving something that I don't know if we've had the full opportunity to discuss it through. I know there's been discussions on this. I don't want to sound like, oh, this is brand new. But my point, though, is this is how it has been addressed. And again, quarterly budget amendments are fantastic. I mean, they're needed and necessary, but that was one of the items that was put in there. So that just to bring to your attention that is something you may want to look at. But to what Charlie just said, I think it's the relationship between the council and the board, how we can work that to the success of Pflugerville is, I think, what we're all wanting to do.
Well, I think we have a board today that, at least from my perspective only, is that has the wherewithal to understand economic development and has some experience in economic development, whereas previous boards, I can tell you, did not. And they weren't, even if they'd gotten direction from council, they wouldn't understand, not that they couldn't understand. And I think over the years, what's happened is that, from what I've seen, is it seemed to be a them and us kind of mentality as a separate entity, separate groups working in different directions when we should have been working together. And so I don't know where we failed in that area, and if it was part of the city council, I apologize for that. But I have very adamantly, and Adam knows this, made my position that we have to have in the future appointees that understand Pflugerville. Actually, probably should have lived in Pflugerville a while to understand what economic development means. It means something different to the PCDC than it does to the city council. I mean, it means the same, but even all of us have a role in economic development because we have associations and relationships with developers and vice versa, and they may not be tied into PCDC, but it's still economic development. And so the role and agenda for the executive director, I think, needs to be very clear in terms of driving economic development into the future, because that's where we need to be looking and understanding what's happened in the past and where we are in the present to know how to get there, and hopefully we will land on the right candidate.
Mayor, to your point, I believe there's a longer residency requirement to be on the Parks and Rec Board than there is to be on PCDC.
I did.
So I think we probably need to look at that.
So,
Councilor, yeah, Oscar.
just a comment. And thank you for your overview before. That was very helpful. But also, I wanted to kind of highlight the last comment you made about leave them alone and let them do. Excuse me. And this is a frustration for me because this is new to me. But my take on this is you put in place people who you expect to do the job and you let them do the job. You know, I apologize. I didn't look at the agenda coming up on the consent. But this FTE thing, we had this conversation. That should not, in my opinion, should not get to the board. That should be resolved by a director and whoever the city person have that conversation privately. That's not a discussion to be had in public about people. People private, process public. So definitely allow people to do their job. If something's broken, fix it. Like I said, there's 3 of you guys on the PCDC board. You can do what you need to do to make changes. You have the power. That's something. My fault for not doing the dumpster dive into this. I saw this as this external entity with the mission to bring companies, increase economic development in Pflugerville, and they have the wherewithal and the direction to go do that. And, you know, this whole management style of, yes, you guys have the last say, but if you don't trust the people you've hired, then you need to change the people.
Exactly.
I mean, so, I don't know. Like I said, this is new to me. It's kind of frustrating because this is not how I've run companies in the past.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here right now for such a time as this. And, you know, sometimes from frustration, we're able to create something magical. I'm glad you feel uneasy about it. Thank you for speaking up.
It's not a motion, but I second that as well, Kimberly. Oscar's been a very fresh voice. He's been a very powerful one as well. And I think it's that kind of diversity of voice and opinion that makes the kind of decisions that we put together ones that you can have some confidence in. At least that it's pretty well thought out. Now, if it's what you want to do or not, hey, that's for you to decide. But it's going to be good. I'm sorry, Rudy, I didn't catch that.
Now I laughed because I was like, yeah, you're right. That's a fair point.
Okay.
Do you think you have the director that you wanted, that you were looking for?
Thank you, because that's exactly the segue I was looking for to go into how I'd like to go ahead and wrap this up.
No, I mean, we talked about it and we were talking about your proposal. I'm
And
not sure if that.
I'd like to summarize what I believe the direction is, and then invite commentary, and let's make sure we get to violent agreement on what the direction actually is. The direction is that, for the time being, especially here within the next, say, 3 to 6 months, the structure of PCDC will effectively remain as it is. The executive director role is going to be reporting to a senior city official and not the board. Is that what I've heard?
No.
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 Okay, good.
No.
See, this is why we have conversations.
No,
So,
Executive
the
director.
executive director will
doesn't
report to the
change.
board of the
To the board.
PCDC.
it doesn't change.
And
Yeah, no
so,
change.
that will also
With the
place the
exception of those things
PCDC in the
we've done.
primary role, I believe, of interviewing, qualifying.
But the redundancies of services are being.
Right.
Well, I'm about to get to that because,
Can I have a,
go ahead.
Can you elaborate on that? What you mean by redundancies?
So one perfect example is what. Oh, okay, I know you. Go ahead.
I do want to clarify. I said IT. I would have to look at a feasibility of that. They use Max. I mean, I threw out something. I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, I just want to be clear. I need to
And
look
that's,
at
let me-
it.
but
let
let me say, that's my point. See,
I need to do a
those
feasibility.
decisions shouldn't come from the board. It should come up.
No,
So-
but the decision to
You
evaluate
you can say a mission. The mission is to
the
reduce
mission is
redundancy.
to reduce
Right,
redundancies.
but it shouldn't be decided here.
No,
That's my
definitely not.
frustration.
Definitely not. No,
That's my
You would just
frustration.
direct me to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm-
to
Yeah,
to explore the possibility of expanding the current shared services agreement.
And Oscar, part and again,
That's all I'm asking
you
for.
want to hear you want to hear why that's even a conversation, because when we hear that our software is not able to go and integrate with each other on things, when things aren't collaborating, that's what we as a council we're just not understanding. We're like, wait a minute, we're all on the same team. We should be all on the same team. Why wouldn't we be using things that are interoperable and working on those things? And that's where when I talk about redundancies and some of the other aspects, I'm like, okay, let's just make sure that we have everything clear regarding what services and who's providing these services and working well with that. Like, I don't know about an executive assistant, like you said, but I also know that, hey, listen, from a finance standpoint, I think it was one of the best decisions made, because we kept hearing about issues with finance and how it's reporting and everything else organized with that. And I like exactly what Kim had to say about, hey, listen, and I'm kind of joking but not joking when I said we're not the University of Texas. No, you're right. Nobody should be losing an FTE or their job over something like this, period, right there as well. We should be able to find spots where we can actually put folks in.
Rudy, I would suggest along those lines, when we talk about redundancy, I just want to make sure that temperature check. To me, redundancy is an excess of capability or capacity. We never want to be in a single point of failure either, where if we lose the one thing that can do it, we all come to a dead stop and there's nothing we can do. That we don't want. But we do want to operate in the most lean fashion possible. And so I think there's a really good balance we can strike there. And I think along Oscar's thinking, the direction is, let's look at the functions we have and let's find out. And that comes from the ground up, just like Oscar suggested, the people with the nuts and bolts day to day, as to how they can best work most effectively. They'll come up with recommendations. We'll look at, hell yeah, makes sense. City council will get it, approve it. That's how we move on. Set that to the side. I think that's good.
Yes, simply asking you to consider it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that pretty much comes to the staffing piece too. And I think we all agreed that that was something that's going to have to unfold as we begin to go through the candidate vetting process and having those conversations about what the role is going to look like and what the outcome would be in terms of what these aggregation kind of studies or integrated, whatever you want to call it, in terms of how we can get some good the economics. Sorry, I'm not doing too good. The economy of scale, as well as making sure we don't have the single point of failure. And then finally, in terms of recruitment, we are about to discuss on item 3B, something that I don't have a lot of line of sight to, so I'm very interested in that. But I think in terms of our recruitment, we're agreed that we want to conduct a national search. We're looking for a candidate that brings some gravity to the position, because I think we all understand that this really isn't just about Pflugerville. We're in the driver's seat to be a leader in the region. And I invite you to consider the I-30, or the SH-130 corridor event that we just had. And the kind of great feedback that we got from that and the kinds of voices that we had in attendance and speaking there. That really puts us in a position to where we can begin to have a much greater impact just beyond our own borders. And we have to be very cognizant of that as well, I think. Certainly we're elected officials and we only control what we control. But the decisions we made have consequences to everyone around us. And that's why, it's critically important that we have someone who can build those kind of relationships, bring that capability in to enable us to create that mesh that goes, coast to up into the panhandle.
So I think we agree on some things, but the thing that we disagree about, and I agree with Oscar in terms of I think I said earlier, not my duck, right? In terms of deciding staffing things right now. Although the consent agenda that Darrell pointed out, I think we've already discussed that and have movement there in terms of transitioning that FTE. But the thing that I'm still not sure I hear agreement on, but I do hear discussion around is where the ED eventually, the new ED will report. And I still think in terms of those efficiencies that we touched on early on, in terms of getting things done, in terms of conflict that we've had in the past between the two entities when they're trying to discuss things. You know, PCDC oftentimes, you talked about openness and whatnot, but oftentimes PCDC has to operate under an NDA or something, and we don't know things.
That's
right?
correct.
There's things that we don't know because you can't let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. And so I feel like, as everyone keeps saying, we're at a critical point in growth. Things are happening. I feel like, and this is my opinion, that we can improve efficiencies by having the new executive director be part of the city organization. And I disagree with Caesar's point about not being able to reach out and talk to that person. I often will chat on Teams. I do it all the time. Serena's always lurking. I always include her when I chat with any of the ACMs.
Lurking. Yeah.
I don't think we're prohibited from having conversations with staff. We're prohibited from directing staff, which is different. So in other words, if I am, message James and say, hey, can you build a report for me for, traffic fatalities at all the major intersections in town? He'll push back and say, well, I need to ask Serena. But I should never ask him to do that, right? Because that's directing staff. That's creating work. That report may not be just something that he can pull up a PDF that he has. And so the idea is that you can still have conversations. Those conversations are reported back to the city manager. Say, well, Caesar reached out and he was talking about this program, and this is what we said, and whatever. And as long as we're not directing staff, I think we stay out of trouble. And so I don't see any problems with the executive director reporting through the city or hierarchy. I do see, again, organizational efficiencies in terms of if that director needs to look at potential zoning impact or water needs for a data center or whatever. I see organizational efficiencies in terms of them being incorporated or encompassed within the city government, where they can just reach out to a peer as opposed to trying to hurdle through interagency, liaisons or discussion channels or whatever those processes are set up. And so I would advocate for the new position, being within the city organization, whether that's directly reporting to the city manager or directly reporting to an ACM.
I can understand that position, and I think you laid it out, very logically. I would also say that were I in your shoes, I'm not sure I'd engage that much potential risk in terms of that much potential risk in terms of having to delineate between directing and having a conversation. I think that to me is a really fine line to walk, and I wouldn't want to put someone in a position that they might be putting themselves in any kind of risk. When you work in the financial services world, the saying goes, the mere appearance of impropriety is as bad as impropriety. And I think that's something we want to be cognizant of as well. And in the point that you also made about the interagency, conversations, I'd like to take that as an opportunity that we can demonstrate that because we are essentially an integrated unit, whether we're an independent board and operating, with a degree of independence in quotes, and then city staff, we shouldn't have to run into roadblocks in terms of how we exchange information across resources. We should be able to work that out to where we can have direct channels, direct lines, so that conversations can occur, decisions can occur, actions can occur, and we can move progress forward at a very rapid pace. And I think those are things that we could do, and I think is complete within your realm to authorize and allow and execute. And so I would put that as just an operational challenge for us, let's say for, the next, 12 to 16, 18 months, for us to look at how we get better at doing that. I'm not sure that you have to institutionalize it, by placing a position. And just in case you're wondering, I think I share some of the concerns that Adam was voicing a little earlier. If I want to attract the widest range of applicant pool, of the highest caliber kind of client employee that we want to attract, I'm hesitant to think that someone who knows they're going to report to a deputy city manager, regardless of whatever example you want to cite to me right now, is going to be somebody that would come down from wherever, to take that role. It would be a concern I'd have. It's not an overriding one, but it's just one. And I think, as we see the kind of applicants that, apply to the position, it may give us a good feel for, what kind of resume are we getting? What kind of individuals expressing that initial interest?
Okay.
Let me just say, Amy is known nationally, and so it's going to take some internationally.
You know-
It's going to take some really big shoes. So we
Well,
do need
but that's
a
an
good
important
candidate.
thing too. Amy's known internationally, and she's known, nationally. Pflugerville is getting attention
Yep.
nationally and internationally, and I'm telling you, I so firmly believe this. We have got to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I'll say, that's a great point, great segue, as you're saying that, we have an executive director current right now that's known internationally. We have a city manager who's well known
Yeah.
across Texas and the United States.
International.
This goes to Jim's point, and I guess maybe I just read it wrong. I always thought we had to ask permission to talk. I didn't know his direction. I know there was a former city council member who used to try to spy on the city manager by talking to some of the city staff and everything else. And so, I thought I could have swore that was in there that we had to seek
Former
permission.
council member.
Yeah,
He did say-
and
he did say-
hold
he
on,
did
hold on,
say-
no, and I brought it up because the gentleman sitting behind you was denied access to speak to somebody who's on staff, and so that's why I brought that up. That you wanted to speak to a former chief of police. Yeah, you did. Anyway.
I've never.
Anyway, the point,
Yeah,
getting
that's
back
never
to
happened.
Jeff's point, the problem that I have with two entities that are so well known is sometimes you have egos, and we all fight this amongst ourselves. You
Or
have
we
two-
revel in it.
Yeah. We revel in our own ego. And you have two egos who want to go in two different directions, and neither one of those entities are allowing themselves or their staffs to work together. And you've had boards on both sides who are like, y'all handle this. So to Jim's point, sometimes when you have it under direction of a city council, if you guys aren't, and not necessarily
Understand.
you guys, I'm just like
Yeah.
we were saying earlier, future ones, if the board is not willing to step in and tell the executive director, hey, we know you're God's gift to the world, but you got to work with our city manager, because we're willing to do that to our city manager. You have problems, and those create problems. And if we have that structure like Jim was talking about, we won't have those problems because you can talk to Rudy right there or Councilman Mateer how many times he's put things on the agenda because things aren't getting addressed here. And so we certainly address them with our city manager. So I see the flip side. I see Jim's argument on there with a future executive director who doesn't want to play nice with our
And-
staff.
So,
yeah, and I can see that.
Gentlemen, we can debate that all night, and we don't have all night. I think we have had a couple of proposals from Councilwoman Holliday and Councilmember McDonald. One that's a little more directly connected to the city, one that really doesn't change a whole lot other than the integration of services where the city can be of value to the Economic Development
Can
Corporation.
I clean it up a little bit
You
more?
can, please.
All right, let me make it even more simple right now. I'm asking that we leave it as it is, and I'll remove the part about considering. We've talked about it. It's going to come back up later. I feel very confident about that. Before a clean conversation, I'm asking that PCDC structure remain as it is for this time, for now.
Period. No
Period.
changes.
No changes.
Okay.
And we're gonna discuss that later, well, like in a
Well,
motion, right?
is it,
If this, I don't see it for action.
it's
under
not on
three-
action.
Charlie, you can.
Charlie?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
looking
you can
for
take
clear
action
direction.
under this posting. I
Okay.
don't think that, the Texas Open Meetings Act doesn't require it to state you're gonna take
Okay.
action. It requires to give notice of the subject to be discussed, and
We're gonna
so.
remember that next time. Remember that guy. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so,
And it's, I mean, it depends on how it's
Right,
posted. But this
exactly.
is very clearly
So-
says what you're going to be talking about.
so we have an opportunity to take some action and, at least, present that structure that is needed to move forward.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
So I just need a motion.
All right, was that a motion?
Did you make a motion?
I make a motion that we leave the PCDC structure the same.
With your caveats.
Nope,
Nope, no
No
caveats.
caveats.
no caveats at this
That you were
time.
saying earlier.
Okay, hold on. Let me second it, so then we can have a discussion.
Okay, all right.
Okay, motion and second.
But earlier there were caveats, what we were talking about with Oscar, that we are gonna explore those options.
Yes, but I don't know if I can include, would like for them to consider and explore them, but I don't want those considerations at this very given moment as we're selecting our next candidate to interfere in any way. We can come back to it.
Y'all feel the same?
And we need to.
So my 2 cents on that is, I agree that the new executive director is the one that should be getting in the weeds and deciding where the integration points can best be solidified. But I disagree with leaving the structure as it is today. I think that we're at a unique opportunity to be that an agent of change and try a new structure that has some demonstrable efficiencies. And so that's all
I
I
thank
got
you
to say.
for that.
All right, have a motion and a second. Is this a roll call,
No.
Trista, or it's all pulled up? Okay,
Think so.
I'm sorry.
It's not pulled up here.
It's pulled up on us.
Okay.
You gotta-
You gotta switch. She just doesn't want you to vote.
How do I switch this?
Oh, there we go. It should be on. here.
Any other comments? I guess
Far right,
not.
Right. Is that up on there?
Okay.
Right here.
Oh, did you put it?
Solo, say solo.
Okay.
Ms. Holliday, have you voted?
Did not show up for you yet.
It's on there now.
Okay. Okay, motion carried. Have 1, 2, 3, 4 yeas and 3 nays. All right. You have direction.
Got it. And thank you very much. And with that, we'll close item.
Okay.
We'll now go to item 3B. This is 2024-0409. Discuss and consider action to approve a contract with Affion Public Limited Liability Corporation to aid the PCDC and the City Council in recruitment of the next executive director of PCDC. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not familiar with this particular item. I'm sorry I don't have a line of sight to this. Serena, was this added by
This is,
someone on?
this is our item.
Oh,
yeah.
cool. Would you mind giving an intro?
Sure. So we do searches regularly. We use firms to do so. Affion has been part of our, I'd list many directors that we hire. So what I would recommend is that allow that international, they can do a national search. What we can do, and it's in our service agreement to perform recruitment for PCDC. Anyways, I normally don't bring these to council. They're not required to come to council. I brought it to you for more transparency. So this is something we normally do in operations. What I would suggest, because this one's a little bit different, I would have probably a board member from PCDC, a board member from council, give me a little subcommittee. I do not want to have this conversation every 2 weeks. So give me a little subcommittee that can really talk about the process, who you want on the panel, who can be where, when, just the nitty gritty of that search. We're not asking to serve on that panel. We want to give y'all support to be able to do so. I would hope that we can sign an agreement, but really importantly too is I need points of contact to make this happen.
Serena, just a question, just as somebody who's been in the industry and done plenty of searches for years, like what made Affion why Affion Public for this particular search versus like a Next Move group or?
Sorry, I was not ready for like RFQ. I apologize. Adam, I would say that because we do this, I mean, really tens a lot throughout a year. They're the best that I've used. I've been doing this about 20 years. That we see them. I'll be real frank with you. They call me for they recruit. This isn't just a post on TML or a post. I've seen other recruitment firms that I think just post. I've got our P+C director here that works more closely with them personally than I do. She's shaking her head that she agrees that they're an active recruitment firm. That's what I would. We also did ask them today a little bit about candidates already. They're giving us advice anyway.
So the only thing I would add is this: the reason why I voted the way I did on two-way was because the executive director, but I'm concerned about, again, and you want to call it efficiencies, whatever you do that's I would want whoever we're doing with us to look at that, because that's quite literally something this is me being selfish. I'm tired of hearing about it. Like, I mean, I hear it's over and over again. I keep hearing about they do this, et cetera, right there. Let's look at that, and whoever's, if this company, you said they do well by you, and they do well currently by other folks who know about them. I want to look at that, as part of that. I want to see what that looks like, what that comes up from there. To Oscar, to your point, okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to. We don't have to be making a decision on the dais about this, but I think that it's happened enough times where let's look and see what we can do to go ahead and get rid of, those issues.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm so sorry, I just want to raise a quick question. Serena, you said something very interesting about how we're doing a national search, and then I heard you mention the word international. It got me to thinking a little bit. I just want to make sure, is it going to be a condition for this particular role that any applicant is going to have to be a U.S. citizen? Is that going to be correct?
Again, that's in the weeds.
I don't know.
Okay,
I'm
then I'm
sorry.
going to take that off. I'm afraid I mentioned that. I'll just put that little suggestion in your mind, and we'll move on.
That's up to the search firm.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We don't need to go there.
Fair enough.
I do want to point out, though, that, and I'm sorry, the last vote should have some germaneness here, but the three members that this body appointed to be liaisons on, we don't have a lot of 4-3 votes, but the three members that y'all appointed to be on the PCDC board voted together, which is unusual, but they all voted together and in the minority of the changing the structure. And I just would like the members that voted in favor of it can ask that to be brought back up. I just want you to think about the fact that your three representatives on the PCDC board voted a different way.
But thank you so much. But that also feels like, but that's not what they're saying, right? And so we're having a discussion right here. And I just feel like there was an opportunity for that to come up. That's why we did that. So we could get a feel, a temperature for what it is up here.
Well, and I think it's also important that we recognize, we appoint members to the PCDC board to carry out the direction and the will of council. And do we have the right members on the board? Are they going to be able to carry forward the direction of council? I would hate to think that, we would have people trying to supplant the will of council through this process. I would hope that y'all are on board with the decision that was passed by the body.
That's a different tact.
I wouldn't.
I didn't go down that road at all. I merely pointed out a fact, and asked those that voted affirmatively to reconsider. If you're questioning whether or not the members that voted against the decision will abide by it, that's a different discussion.
I think that's exactly what it comes down to, though. Because we have, as a body, made a decision, and asking the body to reconsider the decision because certain individuals who already had the opportunity to speak made a different decision.
Gentlemen,
That seems appropriate.
we just jumped back to 2A.
We did.
I don't think we need to be there.
And I don't think we should be.
I'm sorry, and lady,
Yes,
forgive me.
that's messy, right.
Yeah.
So to Rudy's point, I'm gonna move us back to 2B.
3B.
Well, it's
Yeah.
two on ours, it's three on yours.
Oh,
on your
sorry.
Yeah, we got a
Correct.
different
Sorry, here it
thing.
is.
Vernacular.
Are we not
terminology.
trusting the city's expertise?
I'm so sorry, ma'am.
Are we not trusting the city's expertise? They've done this before to look for candidates.
What, are you talking about like our particular question?
Right, like, this particular agency.
Oh, it was just more for clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And then, but also leading to, if Rudy's asking us to look at it, does that slow down the process in any way? I thought you wanted us to, okay, perfect. Maybe I misunderstood.
No, I don't think it's. You asked me if it slows in the process. I don't think so because
No.
she's got a firm that.
Ready.
This is what they're.
Okay.
Member Holiday, I would suggest that within 30 days, we'll have a good temperature check as to whether the Affion is giving us quality
Great.
candidates or not. If they're not, that's the opportunity to do a pivot and possibly engage another party or approach Affion and say, hey, we're just not seeing what we think we want.
Exactly.
Because we could say what we want,
Oh, yeah.
they misinterpret
Perfect.
or we missay it. So a lot of things can go on
Thank
there.
you.
They did bring us Robbie, Thomas, Flip. They've done okay so far. I know.
Meh.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I have a
That's-
question
I mean,
specifically
so
about,
sorry.
about Affion. I understand,
like we
Madam
got-
City Manager, that you've used them for recruiting for a variety of positions and that they're active recruiters. Do they have a particular expertise with EDCs? Are there recruiting firms that have particular expertise with EDCs? And is that something you considered in your process to pick them as the party to do the recruitment of the PCDC executive director?
I don't know any recruiters that do specific to a division of a city economic development per se. I could get them to show what all they've done for economic. I know they've done economic development directors, but typically in the municipal world, it's each division, whether it be public works, finance.
Yeah, I would think
I
each,
feel
Currently
comfortable.
looking
I
for
would
an
put it-
economic director of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
I'd
Well-
put it to you, Mr. Mayor, that we could go to Carlton Schwab at TEDC if we wanted to get some perhaps input on who might, be a firm that if they specialized in it, like Mr. Rogers is suggesting, that perhaps they'd be someone,
That's what
why
I'm
only have
saying.
one group looking for us?
I can answer that. Just, I think,
I have a list of their economic development placements if you would like them.
And I was about to say,
for you.
listen. It's not their first rodeo.
No, it's not.
Jim literally just brought up, what they're doing right now. There's nothing that and I just want to make it clear in general.
They're heavy.
I just want to ask the PCDC board if they're poised to make a motion and approve the agreement. Because I think, from what I've heard, this is an incredible firm with an incredible track record of bringing great candidates, and I'm ready to move forward, but I think you get to do it first.
Yeah, well,
And I think Darrell wants to.
Darrell would like to make a comment, yes.
Yeah, so I read the contract, and if we enter into it, fine, but again, once we enter into it.
We're on the hook for a third of the payment.
Exactly. Or actually could be even more than that, but bottom line though is,
Acceptance of candidate and then placement of candidate, so we'd have to accept that candidate from them.
correct. So,
What are we talking?
all,
Yeah, it's a third.
yeah, all I'm getting at is, this may be the firm we choose and go with. But do we want to do it right this moment before we've had a chance to really digest what we were just talking about as far as the bigger picture? Or is this the strongest horse?
Do you want to mention?
Well, my other question for you then is who's your interim? Because, we want to move as quickly as possible. Obviously, you got to have an interim in place. While we
That is
make this
correct,
happen.
and the interim, Christian will assume an interim executive director role upon Amy Madison leaving the position.
Yeah, he's just that. That's what he's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Christian I think there's a definition of terms, there's acting and interim. So acting fills in
Is
the
what
role,
he
but
assumes,
then
interim
there's
is what you appoint.
But then there's an appointment of interim, and I don't think the board has appointed an interim yet.
We have not taken an official action, that is correct.
And just, I want to be clear. That's a good point you brought up. Is your interim also going to be an applicant in this pool?
I can't speak to 100% on that.
Okay. Because we've had that conversation when we were looking for our interim city manager. We had that.
And in all honesty, Mr. Menayer, I wouldn't want to speak to 100% in an open public like
Yeah,
that.
no, that's fine. That means that's something to keep in mind with that as well. I've seen. I mean,
There's no rule that says that put any person working at PCDC
there's
could not
no
be.
rule
That's correct.
whatsoever. That was something we wanted
That's
to be
correct.
cognizant of. Right. Again, Councilmember McDonald just showed me the plethora of economic development experience this organization has, including some small city down
Rapids.
south. What is it that Councilmember Roger calls it? Our suburbs to our south. City
Our
of
largest
Austin.
suburb to the south.
Yeah.
But also Grand Rapids.
That's not my lingo, that's hers.
Okay, I don't have any qualms whatsoever with moving this. I said with that, I just want to make sure look at the whole, as you're looking at it, look at the whole totality of what this looks like, the structure.
Well, it's an item on our agenda, so I don't know if you guys,
Does order matter?
Well, kind of, sort of. So,
Yeah.
Adam,
Yeah, so I mean, I'd like to make the motion to accept the contract with Affion as is.
and I'll second that motion.
Okay.
And for the board, all in favor, including you three.
aye.
Good. Okay, unanimously. So, Affion will be
I don't
engaged.
know about
Okay.
that board though. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, there's too much similarity going on there.
Let me go ahead and also pose the same question to I don't have a motion
So
and have and a second to approve item 2B in our agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Motion carried.
Well,
All right.
thank you, council.
We'll move
This will
forward.
give us that opportunity to get the wheels in motion. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Oscar's gonna stick around for consent agenda?
We're adjourned.
Thank you.